This is Henry Hill. Henry spent half his life running with one of the most violent mafia gangs in America, having to do whatever was asked of him to survive. His life in the mob was made infamous by Martin Scorsese's gangster classic, Goodfellas. Goodfellas is widely regarded as the most unflinching portrayal of life in the mafia ever made. And this scene of a brutal mob slaying actually happened in front of Henry Hill. What Henry witnessed will haunt him for the rest of his life.
We used to turn my fucking stomach, you know, and I mean, I lived in fear every fucking day of my life.
But Henry's real life in the mob was far more vicious than Goodfellas could ever portray.
It's extraordinary. I don't know what kind of a person it makes you become.
I was fucked. I was literally fucked, you know what I mean?
And where the movie ends, the darkest part of Henry's life began.
That's when life really became insane.
In a bid to save his own life, Henry became a government informant and betrayed his childhood friends. The mafia issued a multi-million-dollar contract on his life.
They were not going to take this lying down. They were going to look for Henry, and they were going to look to have him executed.
It's not a way to live. I mean, he might as well be dead.
This is the whole story of Henry Hill, told by the few that survived.
Why I'm still here, why I'm around, heck, I don't know. I got those guardian angels on my shoulder, for some reason.
This is Pine Street, Brooklyn, New York, childhood home to Henry Hill. During the 1950s, this was a thriving, tight-knit immigrant community.
It was a middle-class, blue-collar neighborhood. You know, everybody knew everybody on the fucking block, and, you know, they knew everybody's cousins and uncles and where the fuck they came from.
Henry was one of 7 siblings born to an Italian mother and a hard-working Irish father.
I felt out of place at home, and I was always getting in trouble with my father. I mean, I could never do the right fucking thing.
He would do things that would invoke the anger of my father.
He used to kick the shit out of me all the fucking time. And, but I deserved that, you know, I mean, I really did. I mean, sometimes I used to do it to spite him, you know what I mean? Just to fucking spite him.
Henry felt equally distanced at school, where undiagnosed learning difficulties gave him an outsider status.
Dyslexia, hyperactivity, ADHD, attention deficit disorder, these weren't diagnosed.
They thought I was a fucking goof-off, you know what I mean? They thought I was doing it on purpose. I mean, I couldn't fucking read.
It would have been a rare person who would have risen above those things. And Henry wasn't that rare person.
There were elements in his family life that were problems with his father. And I think, to a certain extent, he looked for his father to other men who behaved differently.
When a cab stand run by Paul Vario, a high-ranking member of a mob family, opened across the street, Henry was transfixed.
Across the street from my house, you know, with the fucking Cadillacs and diamond rings and the fucking wads of $100 bills and bimbos on each arm, and, you know, I mean, it was intoxicating.
For whatever reason, I guess because of Henry's charm, they took a shine towards him.
And they patted me on the fucking back and gave me fucking 5s and 10s. And that day, you know, in the 50s, that was a lot of fucking money.
He became a member of the crew, just as the movie shows, when he was a young kid.
At 13, I was making more money than most of the grown-ups in the neighborhood. I mean, I had more money than I could spend. I had it all. One day, some of the kids from the neighborhood carried my mother's groceries all the way home. You know why? It was out of respect.
Behind him, an inferno erupts, as if he's in hell, basically, because that's where he's going, ultimately.
When he first started earning money and he would try to give gifts to my mother, my father, they would never be accepted, not $1. So he would try to demean, well, I make more in a week than you make all year, you know, during a holdup or robbery or whatever. These things broke my parents' heart.
I thought it was a fucking game, you know. Here, take this fucking pistol, shoot that fucking window a couple of times, you know. Bing, bing, bing. I mean, it was exciting, you know. It was intoxicating.
Henry didn't realize he was becoming involved in one of the New York Mafia's most violent crews, run by Paul Vario, a capo or captain in the Lucchese crime family.
He treated me better than he treated his own sons. I mean, I love the guy, you know what I mean? I did.
Paul Vario was probably one of the most frightening people I've ever been around. He had an aura of menace about him that was quite remarkable, but the Paul Sorvino characterization didn't pick it up at all.
In Goodfellas, Paul Vario was played by Paul Sorvino. The portrayal was of a brooding fatherly figure. In reality, Vario was capable of acts of brutal violence. It was on these streets that Vario would reveal his true nature to an impressionable Henry Hill.
Must have been 12, 13 years old, and took the fucking baseball bat out of the back of the fucking car, walks in the fucking bar, and I could see it, you know, from where I was. And he starts hitting the fucking barmaid with this fucking baseball bat. I mean, beating the shit out of this fucking woman, you know, broke a fucking collarbone. She ratted on him that he was going out with it, you know, to his fucking wife or some bullshit, you know, it was just, you know, stupid shit like that. But I mean, fucking holy fuck, because, you know, I never seen that part of him, you know, at that point. You know, and then I started to realize, you know, these fucking guys are fucking gangsters. Yeah, I mean, you know. But, you know, I kind of knew, and I didn't want to know. I knew when I didn't want to know, you know what I mean? I didn't want to see it. Sometimes I had to see it, you know. Once I crossed that line as a kid, I didn't want to go back. I was spoiled, I was greedy, you know, I think back sometimes, you know, why did I stay?
Through Paul Vario, Henry would befriend Jimmy Burke, a gangster far more unstable and psychotic than Goodfellas could ever show.
The film actually kind of softened him up.
I wouldn't want to see what he was capable of. Let me put it that way.
Together they would pull off an audacious heist that would finally earn Henry the underworld respect he craved.
It's my fucking, it's my payday, you know?
This is Henry Hill. His early life in the Mafia was the basis for Martin Scorsese's gangster classic, Goodfellas.
You know, it's very hard for people in that world to make a straight living. It's very hard for them to do it. It's like an addiction.
Craving money and power, a teenage Henry Hill had chosen to run with one of the most violent Mafia gangs in New York, run by Paul Vario, a capo in the Lucchese crime family.
It's a very evil environment where people are concerned about what their next score is going to be and whether they're going to get killed.
Through Vario, Hill would meet two of the most psychotic gangsters in New York, far more brutal than the movie could ever portray.
Tommy was just a fucking loose horse, a fucking homicidal fucking maniac.
While showing Henry the path to underworld respect, they would entrench him in a violent life that he would never escape.
Every fucking day I was asked to do a little bit more than I did yesterday, you know what I mean? And they were just sucking me in, you know? Not, you know, but, I mean, you know, I just didn't know the word no, you know what I mean? Whatever I was asked to do, I did.
Sensing his inevitable fate, Hill made his first of two ultimately doomed attempts to escape the clutches of the Mafia.
I figured, fuck it, you know, let me join the army. Maybe these fucking people will leave me the fuck alone, you know what I mean?
On June the 11th, 1960, Henry Hill joined the U.S. paratroopers stationed in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, 500 miles away from Vario's crew.
It was sort of a feeble attempt that he would make periodically throughout his life to distance himself from this gangster way of life.
I don't know, maybe I was bored with that fucking shit, you know what I mean? You know, I was ready to move on in my life and didn't know how.
However, Henry's life of crime was already far too ingrained.
It's very hard for people in that world to live what you would say a more straight existence.
I got in a lot of trouble in the army. I had a couple court-martials, you know, drinking and just fucking carrying on, fighting the Marines.
He started to resume some of his criminal activities that he learned in Brooklyn, such as gambling, shylocking. He was lending people money.
After spending 2 months in a military stockade for fighting and stealing a sheriff's car, Private Hill was discharged from the U.S. Army.
When he had a bad run with the Army, he went back to the welcoming arms of the Vario crew, and he found a home there.
It was right there, you know, and they all was glad to see me come home, and, you know, then it was a lot different, you know what I mean? Then it was the real fucking deal.
Henry's return to Mafia life was sealed when he met Jimmy Burke, played by Robert De Niro in Goodfellas. However, De Niro didn't portray the true brutality of the real Jimmy Burke.
He was a maniac. He was a fucking maniac. And people knew that they couldn't cross that fucking line with him. You crossed that fucking line with him, you were dead. And you didn't get a second chance. You know, he'd dish you to fucking death, you know, take you to dinner, and then fucking kill you, you know, for dessert. I mean, that was Jimmy.
With his fearsome reputation, Burke was Hill's ticket to money and underworld respect.
Somebody like Jimmy the Gent was a terrific mentor. He would teach you how to pull burglaries, robberies, big holdups, how to deal in cocaine, how to deal in heroin. He knew the ropes.
No matter what it was. I mean, if it was fucking dealing in stocks and bonds, or fucking, or hijacking a truck, or fucking whacking somebody, you know what I mean? Jimmy, he had the answers, period.
In the Mafia, the key to respect was earning big money, and Jimmy Burke showed Henry the way when he introduced him to JFK Airport.
When Burke was finally arrested, he was flying in a plane over JFK Airport, and he looked down, he smiled, he said, "One day all that was mine."
By the early 1960s, over $30 billion worth of freight was passing through Kennedy Airport every year. Burke taught Hill the art of hijacking the cargo.
Jimmy's main thing was hijacking trucks at the airport. Sometimes we'd steal 2 fucking trucks, 3 trucks a fucking day out of there. You know, and we had warehouses, and we had fucking forklifts, and we had fucking, I mean, we had it down to a fucking science.
Hijacking airport cargo had become such a problem that the US government made a film warning freight companies of the Mafia's activities.
The hijackers easily ply their trade and too often successfully avoid apprehension.
Sergeant, I just lost one of my trucks in Brooklyn.
The film was too little, too late. The Mafia already had a vice-like grip over the airport, with people at every level on the payroll.
We had the fucking shop stewards, the fucking, you know, the bosses of the fucking union. You know, they were fucked.
It was all connected. I mean, the drivers knew they were getting hijacked. The hijackers knew the drivers. Sometimes they're even related.
And those who couldn't be bribed were forced into silence through intimidation.
They got away with it because people were afraid. People were terrified.
They were literally fucked, seriously. They didn't, what do you get killed? You know what I mean? They'd find them in the fucking trunk of a car somewhere.
Once Hill had mastered the art of hijacking trucks, Burke helped him plan a heist that made him in the eyes of the Mafia.
It was a major deal, and I think that in that sense, Henry earned respect.
In 1968, Hill learned through an airport insider that $500,000 in cash was being stored at the Air France depot at Kennedy Airport. But there was a problem. Hill informed his mentor, Jimmy Burke, about a straight-shooting guard who stood in between them and the cash. Together, they hatched a plan to relieve the guard of his keys.
The way they did it, they spent many weeks looking over the guy who was in charge of this operation and found out what his weaknesses were. And as I recall, his weakness was pornography and prostitutes.
After getting the guard very drunk, Hill and Burke drove him to a motel where the hooker they had hired was waiting.
Because the guard hasn't a clue. And he takes his pants off, and then, so of course, boom, they pull the keys, make a copy of the key, put the keys back in the guy's pants. Now, he goes back to work the next day, but they have the key to the Air France safe.
On the 8th of April, 1968, Henry Hill stole over $400,000 from Air France.
You couldn't even fucking carry the fucking suitcases out. I mean, it was clean as a whistle, you know.
The Air France heist was headline news. Obeying Mafia law, Henry split the haul with the Vario crew.
There is no greater gift you can give one of those guys than $500,000 in stolen money.
Money talks in that business, and if Henry was going out and sharing the loot with others, then they were going to respect him.
I mean, that just sealed it, you know. I mean, no matter where the fuck I went, you know, they were just, you know, fucking red carpet for me too, you know.
The Air France job earned Henry the underworld respect he had craved since adolescence. And with